The news seems to keep getting worse out of Bosnia, numbing us with its relentlessness. But we get shocked anew each time we see the pictures. And today, for the first time, we get a glimpse of life in eastern Bosnia, the isolated mountainous area where thousands of Muslim refugees are slowly starving, as the United States searches for ways to get food to the people without getting involved in their war. When the Serbs refused to let United Nations relief trucks travel into the Muslim areas of eastern Bosnia, the U.S. started dropping supplies from the sky. For weeks now, the U.S. Air Force, flying out of Rhein-Main Air Force Base, has carried tons of food and medicine to the people of Bosnia, while the American people wonder whether the supplies are getting through, whether they're doing any good, and whether any of the factions have devised a way to use food as a weapon. We've seen the eerie pictures of American planes dropping their bulky beacons of survival. Tonight, we see where the parcels land, and surprisingly, the first sign of an American military man on the ground in eastern Bosnia. He's witnessed the impact of the airdrops. These scenes come to us from the town of Srebrenica, a place almost impossible to get to. ABC's Tony Birtley finally managed it last week, in what can only be described as an heroic effort to let us see what's happening in Srebrenica. Tony traveled by foot and by horseback to get into the isolated area. Since he arrived, he's run out of food and been injured by Serbian fire. But still, he smuggled out the story.
Nightfall in Srebrenica, and people light fires on the streets and the hillsides to wait for what they call the planes from God. After 11 months under Serbian siege, the U.S. airdrops of humanitarian aid are their only lifeline. In the dead of night, they make their way to the place where the prepared meals have landed, most often on steep-sided hills where people have to crawl up on their hands and knees. For some, like this lady, it's too much. She collapsed from exhaustion. The shape of a U.S. parachute hanging in the trees, showing the drop spot. Gunfire echoes around as the army tries to control the people and the supplies.
I found this about 600 yards uphill. I don't know what it is. It could be medicine or something.
The lucky ones clutch their treasure package of 12 meals and head home. But in the morning, the empty packets lying on the mountain track showing that some were so desperate for food they couldn't wait. American planes have successfully airdropped aid into this area for the last 5 nights running. But villagers say they've received only one prepared lunch packet. The rest has been taken by the army. Most people have been eating only bread made from hay and corn for the last 2 months. That has finished. They now make it from the flour from a hazelnut tree. The father of this family demonstrates how much weight he has lost in the last 11 months. It is not a famine situation here, but it can be best described as slow starvation.
This is what I eat. This is what we eat.
We've got nothing to eat. We're starving to death.
We're practically naked and barefoot. Look at us. We're all in rags. We haven't had anything to eat.
The airdrops have worked, but the people need land convoys which have continually been blocked by the Serbs.
So far, we have been right on the money. I see MRE packets everywhere. I see people carrying MRE supplies. However, we need to change our distribution now to flour, sugar, oil, and other basic necessities. These are very hungry people, and they need basic supplies, not high-calorie items like MREs. Right now, we have done the bare minimum to keep them from starving and from dying. However, we need to do a lot more.
General Philippe Morillon, the commander of UN forces in Bosnia, visited the town. He told the authorities that he would open up road corridors to get food in and order the placement of military observers in the town, which he hopes will deter shelling that locals say comes from across the nearby Drina River in Serbia. But the Serbs have so far failed to give their agreement to the general's plans. But as General Morion tried to leave, hundreds of refugees, many of them recent arrivals from Konjević Polje, blocked his way. They chanted for peace and food and believed that if the UN commander left, the Serbs would start shelling.
The tanks are above, waiting to attack. If you will leave, they will come and attack us.
I heard the news that General Mladic will attack Srebrenica. We just want bread. We want the blue helmets to protect us.
They kept their vigil all night around fires, and in the end, General Morion decided to stay until a ceasefire takes effect and the Serbs allow UN helicopters to fly into Srebrenica.
I've discovered, arriving here, that the situation was worse than I feared myself. And I understood the real fear, anguish, panic of this population. And I have understood that their desire for me to stay here was probably the best solution in order to help them to survive.
The refugee problem is so acute that people are being forced to live in forests in homes made of logs. They are even worse off here, miles from the nearest roads, with no hope of aid or medical treatment. These people say 2 elderly and 3 children have died here of starvation in the last few weeks. Refugees continue to flood into the town, most from Konjević Polje, where the fighting has intensified. 10 women and children were killed on Friday in Serb shelling, and 30 were wounded, including 2 UN soldiers.
There's a lot of people here, a lot of people we saw last night on the streets, a lot of people who are sleeping in very, very cold schoolrooms, and there are people who very genuinely have had absolutely no food for 3 days. Children, women, old people, no food for 3 days, and there's no prospect of food at the moment.
150 alone are sleeping in this cramped room. They lie on the floor, on tables, and even under them.
Srebrenica simply can't cope with this huge influx of refugees. Several hundred are arriving each day. They arrive tired and hungry, desperate not only for food, but for shelter as well.
This 75-year-old lady lies exhausted after a trek of 17 hours across mountain tracks. There is no food to feed her, and she'll probably die within a few days. The sense of hopelessness here is increasing. For some, General Morion's words are a kind of comfort, but few believe they will change the fortunes of this battered people. Tony Birtley, ABC News, Srebrenica, Eastern Bosnia.